Let's talk about middleware and the extensive power it gives us for customization. Now, if you're not used to middleware, Laravel middleware is simply a really easy way for us to hook into the request lifecycle. For example, if we have an ongoing request and the user is maybe trying to access a particular entity, we could check if the user is permitted to access that entity during the request lifecycle and maybe do something and let the user access it, or simply block the user's access. Now let's go into our kernel.php, which is in our app HTTP directory or namespace. And there are a lot of arrays right here that give us an extensive power of customization. We're going to go through each and every one of these. So like we said, middleware are going to run during the request lifecycle. For example, this array right here specifies all middleware that are going to run on every single request. Laravel checks for maintenance with the check for maintenance mode middleware. And you can also define your own custom middleware. For example, if you want to check if the person making the request is of a particular email to give him different responsibilities or different permissions, then you can do that. You can do whatever you want with middleware, okay? If you want to check if the request is coming from a particular IP or a particular country, middleware is where you can go to, okay? So first of all, we have this global array. And if you have a particular piece of code that you want to run on every single request, this is where you're going to register your middleware. This is where you're going to put your middleware, and Laravel is going to run this middleware on every single request. If you have middleware that you want to run only on a set of routes or on a set of requests, therefore you just need to create a custom middleware group, and then you place the group right here, and then you register your middleware in it. We're going to talk about that in a moment. Now, if you want middleware that you want to run only on particular specified routes, then route middleware is where you have to go to. Okay, now we're going to go through each and every one of these arrays, and for us to actually do that effectively, let's go ahead and create our own custom middleware by running php artisan make middleware, and we'll give the name of our middleware to be test. Okay, it can be whatever you want, and automatically Laravel is going to save a middleware in our app http middleware directory. There we go. Now every middleware is just going to be a class with a handle method, and that's it. Okay, and all you need to do is define your code right here, and then make sure at the end you return next, which is some sort of way of telling the request lifecycle to continue, because Laravel is going to execute this code, and you can either stop the request or let it continue. Okay, but you don't want to leave the request lifecycle hanging. So what are we going to be doing? We are going to register this middleware to run on every single request, and I'm going to show you how that works. And for us to know that it's actually running, we are going to hijack the request, and at this very point we are going to set a session. Okay, so session flash, and we are going to be flashing a test key, and we're going to say test key from test middleware is going to be the value. Okay, I'll save that, and I'm going to register this middleware. And like we said in our kernel.php, if you want a middleware to run on every single request, you have to put it in this middleware array. So let's go ahead and register it. We're registering the app http middleware test class, the one we just created. Okay, so Laravel is going to run this on every request. Now, how do we know Laravel has actually run that piece of code and a session has been flashed? Let's head over to our web.php, and right here we have a request, right? And we're gonna simply do a little die dump right here of a session value to see if we have that value. So session get test. Okay, so if that middleware was actually run when we make those requests to the home page, that session should be flashed as test, and we should actually see it there. Okay, so let's go ahead and make this request. There we go. We have this test key from the test middleware, which means that middleware was actually run. Let's go to the next level. We have this group or this array for middleware that are going to run on every single request. Now let's go to the next. It talks about route middleware groups. Okay, and think of this as simply a way to run middleware on a particular set of routes or requests. For example, we have two groups that come by default with Laravel, a web group and an API group. Okay, and like we see right here, the web group is going to actually be all the requests or routes that we match in our web.php. So any route that you register in your web.php is actually going to be under this group, right? And we see in this group, we have middleware that check for the CSRF token. We have middleware that start the session and all that. For the API, we don't have all of this middleware, but we have middleware that throttle and register bindings. Now, when you see a string like this rather than a class, it means Laravel is referencing the middleware registered in another group, which is bindings group and the throttle group. Okay, so for example, if we wanted all the middleware under web to be registered in API, then we're simply going to add the web string right here. Okay, but we're not going to be doing that. So we are going to be testing out the API group. And what we're going to be doing is removing this registration that we registered under the global middleware, and we'll put it under the API group. It means every single request from this group is going to have this middleware run, right? And it also means every single request from this group is not going to have that middleware run. So let's go ahead and try to make this request. There we go. We have null. Why? Because our middleware now is registered under API, but we are trying to dump the session on a route that is registered under web. So let's head over to api.php, and I'm going to extend more about the different route files in a little bit. And we're going to register a new route, and it's going to be a get, and we'll simply visit the home route for this group, pass in a closure, and here we're going to die dump something. Now, if we try to die dump a session value right here, we wouldn't be able to do that, right? Because remember, in our kernel.php, this API group does not have access to the session. Only the web has access. Therefore, we'll head over to our test middleware and modify it a little. What we want to do is, rather than setting a session, let's just die dump this string right here. Okay, so if we make a request and this middleware is actually wrong, the request will be intercepted and it will die, and we'll see this key. Okay, therefore, our api.php route is registered. We don't even need to have anything right here because this closure won't even be executed. So let's try to visit that route. And remember, everything in the api.php is wrapped with the API prefix. Okay, so when we visit that route, we see test key from test middleware. Let's go ahead and modify it a little. Test key from test middleware API routes. Save. Run that request again. There we go. Test key from test middleware API routes, because we have this die dump right here. Okay, so that works as expected. Now I'm gonna pull this out, and let's talk about our last group array right here. And this is the middleware that we want to run only on particular routes. Okay, so if we want to actually specify a middleware just for one route or two routes, then you have to register our custom middleware right there. So I'm gonna pull out our custom middleware here, and I'm gonna register it. And in this case, you notice you have to give a name to the middleware, okay, because you need to identify this middleware from your routes file. Okay, so how do we use this middleware in this case? I'll head over to my web.php, and we can use this one from any route group because we're going to be specifying it on a particular route. So I'm going to remove this, and we'll keep the default return. Head over to my test middleware, modify it a little, and it's going to be specific routes that is going to be die dumped. And how do we apply this middleware? Let's say we wanted to apply this middleware to this route. We just need to attach this middleware method right here, and Laravel is automatically going to change that, and we give in the name of the middleware, in this case test. Okay, so anytime we visit that route, we should see that middleware in action. And there we go, just as easy as that, that middleware is running on that route. Okay, so if we pull that out, make that request again, we have the home page. But if we let that in, make the request, sure enough, we have our die dump. Okay, so that's how we can actually customize our application with middleware. Just to recap, if you want a middleware that is going to run on every single request, then it's going to be stuck in here. But if you want a middleware that is going to run on a particular route group, then you need to put it under the array for that route group. Okay, and if you want a middleware that you can attach on particular routes only, then this is where you are going to register your middleware. But what about having our own custom route groups? I want us to really take a deep dive into understanding what these route groups are and how they're actually found in the web.php and api.php. So I'm going to hit pause on this video right here, and in the very next video, we're going to talk about that extensively.